Did you know that letter A is actually an ox? Or that K started off as a hand? The alphabet we use today traces its lineage directly from the ancient Romans, who, in their quest for efficient communication, drew inspiration from the rich tapestry of the Greek and Phoenician alphabets. Let's uncover the intriguing origins of each letter, revealing how these symbols have transformed in shape and sound to become the foundation of our written language today. A is derived from the Phoenician letter Aleph, which represented an ox's head. This symbolized strength and leadership in ancient times. The Greeks adopted it as Alpha, the first letter of their alphabet, which later transitioned into the Latin alphabet as A through the Romans. Over time, the character evolved in shape, but retained its original position as the initial letter. B originates from the Phoenician Beth, meaning house. The Greeks adapted this symbol into Beta, and it was subsequently adopted by the Romans into the Latin alphabet as B. This letter has consistently symbolized the concept of a dwelling or enclosure throughout its evolution. C comes from the Phoenician Gimel, which depicted a camel. The Greeks transformed it into Gamma, but the Romans simplified it to C. This transformation was influenced by the need to represent various sounds, eventually leading to the C we use today. D originates from the Phoenician Daleth, meaning door. The Greeks turned this symbol into delta, and the Romans adopted it as D. The shape has remained relatively consistent, symbolizing an entryway or passage through time. E derives from the Phoenician he, which may have meant window, but originally represented a man, facing us with raised arms, calling out or praying. The Greeks modified this into epsilon, differentiating it from another Greek letter, eta, which had a similar sound. Later, the Romans incorporated it into the Latin alphabet as E. The letter E is one of the most frequently used letters in the English language, showing its enduring importance. F originates from the Phoenician wa, a hook or peg. The Greeks used a similar form called digamma for an early version of F, and the Romans adopted it directly. This letter has evolved to represent the F sound distinctly in modern languages. G was added later by the Romans, evolving from the letter C to distinguish the G sound. This differentiation was essential for clarity in written communication, and G has since developed into its unique character. H comes from the Phoenician letter Heth, which likely represented a fence or enclosure. The Greeks used it as eta, and the Romans brought it into the Latin alphabet as H. The letter has maintained its structural integrity and meaning over centuries. I is derived from the Phoenician yod, meaning hand. The Greeks adopted this symbol as iota, and it became I in the Latin alphabet. Its straight vertical form has been preserved through various iterations. J developed from I in the Middle Ages. Originally, I and J were used interchangeably, but J eventually came to represent a consonant sound, distinguishing itself from I, in both form and function. K comes from the Phoenician kaf, meaning hand or palm. The Greeks used it as kappa, and the Romans adopted it as K. This letter has retained its hard sound and distinctive shape through its evolution. L has its origins in the Phoenician lamed, meaning goad or whip. The Greeks transformed it into lambda, and it became L in the Latin alphabet. The letter has preserved its basic form, symbolizing guidance or direction. M is derived from the Phoenician mem, representing water. The Greeks used it as mu, and the Romans adopted it as M. Its shape, reminiscent of waves or flowing water, has remained relatively unchanged. N comes from the Phoenician letter nun, meaning fish. The Greeks used it as nu, and it became N in the Latin alphabet. This letter has remained remarkably consistent in its form, even as the alphabet evolved over millennia. O is derived from the Phoenician ayin, representing an eye. The Greeks used it as omicron, and the Romans adopted it as O. Its circular shape has consistently symbolized completeness and vision. P stems from the Phoenician P, meaning mouth. The Greeks used it as pi, and it became P in the Latin alphabet. The letter's form has evolved to represent the P sound clearly in modern alphabets. Q comes from the Phoenician letter Kuf, representing a monkey. The Greeks used it as kappa, and the Romans adopted it as Q. The distinctive tail of the letter reflects its ancient origins and unique sound. The letter R has its origins in the Phoenician resh, meaning head. The Greeks used it as rho, and it became R in the Latin alphabet. During the Middle Ages, the shape of R continued to evolve slightly with different writing styles, such as Carolingian minuscule and Gothic script, but its basic structure remained intact. S stems from the Phoenician shin, representing a tooth. The Greeks used it as sigma, and the Romans adopted it as S. Its serpentine shape has been preserved, symbolizing sharpness and clarity. T comes from the Phoenician ta, meaning mark. The Greeks used it as tau, and it became T in the Latin alphabet. Its straightforward, cross-like form has remained a clear and distinct symbol. U is derived from the Phoenician wa. Similar to F, the Greeks used it as upsilon, and the Romans adopted it as V, which later split into U and V. The rounded form of U distinguishes it from the sharper V. V shares the same origin as U. V and U were used interchangeably until the 17th century, when they were distinguished in English. V has since become a symbol of versatility and distinction. W was developed from the doubling of U in the Middle Ages to represent sounds not covered by V. Its form and function have evolved to accommodate linguistic needs. The history of the letter X is intriguing and a bit more complex. The Phoenician alphabet didn't have a direct equivalent for X. Instead, the sound that X represents in English, a combination of K and S, was usually represented by different letters, depending on the language context. The Greeks introduced chi for a specific sound which was different from X. However, they also had another character chi, which represented a sound closer to K, or ka. When the Romans adapted the Greek alphabet, they chose chi to represent the K and S combination sound in Latin. This is how X made its way into the Latin alphabet, where it was used to represent the sounds we associate with it today. The story of letter Y begins with the Phoenician letter wa, which was a consonant representing a W sound. The Greeks adopted wa but modified it for their use, but they had a few different letters derived from wa, one of which was upsilon. When the Romans incorporated upsilon into the Latin alphabet, it initially represented a U sound. However, as Latin evolved and spread, the letter started to be used for both U and Y sounds, especially in words borrowed from Greek. By the Middle Ages, the letter Y began to be distinguished from U in English, specifically to represent a vowel sound as in myth. Over time, Y solidified its place in the alphabet as a letter that could function as both a vowel and a consonant. Z stems from the Phoenician zayin, representing a weapon. The Greeks used it as zeta, and it became Z in the Latin alphabet. Its sharp, angular form symbolizes its ancient martial origins. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the origins of each letter in the English alphabet. If you found these historical insights as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button to let me know. Share this video with your friends who love uncovering the roots of language. It might just spark some interesting conversations. Drop a comment below and tell me which letter's origin surprised you the most. Your thoughts and questions are always welcome here. Subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so you never miss out on my latest explorations into history, language, and more. Stay tuned for our next adventure together. Until then, keep discovering.